and today we're going to be talking about Immanuel Kant's Categorical Imperative. Now, Kant's ethics, there's all types of things we could talk about, but to make a short video here, we're specifically just talk about how his reasoning works when it comes to ethics, therefore his categorical imperative. Basically, Kant sees his project as a challenge against David Hume, and then utilitarianism, which kind of follows David Hume's idea in the years that come after. Basically, David Hume has taken reason's role out of morality and basically crushed it. Basically, reason is nothing more than logic and cannot help us when it comes to determine what we ought or ought not do. Kant sees his goal as trying to say that no, reason can, and he's going to try to put it back in its rightful place as he sees it. Kant's project also is going against consequentialism of the utilitarians, which was a very popular idea at his time. We're looking at the end of the second half of the 1700s and the very beginning of the 1800s when Kant was writing. Okay, so he sees it as trying to take on those two ideas of Hume and the utilitarians, and what he wants to do is put reason back in its place, like I said. And the main way he wants to do that, he says, it doesn't matter consequences, especially towards utilitarianism. Consequences doesn't matter when it comes to moral actions. For example, here's a really good one. Let's say my friend tells me to take care of his house over the weekend, and I say I will while he's gone. The day I leave on the Sunday, it's rather cold outside, and I decide to turn on his heat. Now, unbeknownst to me, maybe his heater's broken. Okay, and when I turn it on, it accidentally burns the house down. Now, that's really bad. Okay, but as Kant would want to point out, see, the consequences were bad, but was my action really a bad action? And you say, no, it's not. If you think about it, my intentions were good. And what Kant wants to say is the intention of an action is what mattered, or at least in his idea, his word of intention is what he calls a good will. He says there is only one thing in this world that is good without qualification, and he believes it is a good will. Now, what makes a good will? That's kind of a debate, but for him, it's basically any action that is motivated by reasoning. Okay, so any moral action I'm trying to make in which reason is the guide. Okay, and reason, he thinks, provides a sort of mandate to me. All right. To this good will. It's like a command. A will is not just anything. It's a command, and a command that I give to myself that comes from reasoning. Now, he has a particular way in which he thinks this reasoning is, and that's what we're talking about today. That is the categorical imperative. Okay? And he gives the categorical imperative in two forms, which he says both are the exact same thing, just two different ways of expressing it. We will look at that at the end and see if that's really true. But for the first one, this reasoning, or how we get a good will, let's take a look at the first form. Okay? So he claims that when we're committing an action, act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. And what do you mean by maxim? He means by command. Okay? So act according to that command by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So he's saying that reason, he believes, dictates that any command about an action that I'm about to take, okay, command to myself, but to will myself into doing something, I should be able to justify it through universalizing it. Basically asking, if everyone does this, is it something that would still be justified? And the best way I could do it is to put it in like a three-part kind of thinking. So let's try it this way. So the first thing, whenever we have an action, we bring the action, we need to create a maxim. And what he means by that is we need to make a command out of it. Okay? So if my action is to lie, okay, I'm going to say, well, then I must lie in this particular situation. The must, or I have to. Okay, that's the command part of it. All right. The second step, he says, is to universalize the maxim. All right. Universalize. Okay. What he means is originally the command was just to me, but now universalize it. What would happen, or universalize it to all people? And what if all people follow this command? And third is that result. Okay. Does it lead? He says, lead to a contradiction in thought. Okay? And that is the final thing we need to ask ourselves. So once we create a maxim, we universalize it to all individuals, all rational people. Okay? And then finally ask, does it lead to a contradiction in thought? If it leads to a contradiction in thought, as Kant claimed, then you must not do that action. Reason has shown us you cannot. Here we see again Kant trying to put reason's role right back into morality, just like Hume took it out. Okay? So let's give a good example. Let's take the one about lying. It's really good. Okay, so let's say, here we go. Let's say that I told my friend earlier this week I would help him move. Okay, I'll move on Saturday morning. But I end up staying out a little late Friday night, and Saturday morning at 7 comes around when I'm supposed to get up. He's calling me to get me up, and you know what? I'm just too tired. Even though I promised him, okay, that I wanted to, that I was going to go with him, I lied about it, okay? I really don't want to. And so now I'm considering perhaps not keeping my promise. So let's talk about keeping a promise, or a line, all right? That would be it if you broke it, right? So keeping a promise, okay? So what he says first to do is first we need to create a maxim from this. So for example, in this case, when I don't feel like it, I don't have to keep my promises. So that's our first step. So I make that command. When I don't feel like it, I must not keep my promise. Then we take it to the second step, universalize the maxim. Now, we say this, when everybody doesn't feel like it, they must not keep their promise. Everyone now. And then we bring it to the third one. Does that lead to a contradiction in thought? And Immanuel Kant believes it does. What would happen if everyone believed that when it didn't suit them, they were allowed to break their promise? Well, what he says is it would lead to a contradiction in what it means to have a promise. That promise actually means it must be kept. That's what we do. We promise it because no matter what comes up, we still do it. So if everyone did this, it would lead to a contradiction of the meaning of promise. Therefore, not keeping my promise would be wrong, according to reason, as Kant puts it. Now, if we go the other way, ask the other side. Even though it doesn't suit me, I should keep my promise. We create a maxim, okay, with that. Then we universalize it. Even though it doesn't suit everybody, they still must keep their promise. And then finally we ask, does that lead to a contradiction? And of course, it doesn't. It maintains what it means to be a promise. And therefore, though I'm tired this morning, and though I don't want to help him out, and maybe I had an extra drink last night, I much rather keep my promise, or I have to keep my promise, excuse me, according to the first form of the categorical imperative. Okay. Now, one thing I want to point out is there are some problems, and in the later lecture we're going to look at the direct problems to both the first form and the second form. One form is this, and I will bring it up now. It's called the loophole problem. Let's bring this problem up right here. Okay. This is a very common one, though I'll mention it again in the next lecture. But I'll mention it here because it fits. It only applies to the first form. Some say, what if we do this? What if we make a very specific maxim? Like, when it doesn't suit me, and my name is Sean Castleberry, and I'm a professor of philosophy at John Tyler Community College, and I was born in the 1980s, and I drive a red Subaru, and I'm giving this lecture right now at this specific time. And then we universalize that. What happens is, it says everyone whose name is Sean Castleberry, who's a professor at John Tyler Community College, who's teaching a class at a specific time, who drives a red Subaru, on and on and on, then only they, okay, must break their promise. What we see is, we try to see if that leads to a contradiction when it's that specific. It only applies to one person. It only applies to me. And therefore, it looks like in this loophole that if you make your maxim very specific, you might be able to get around the first formulation. Now, Kant has, I think, a very good answer to this. He says what this loophole problem is actually doing is trying to get away from this second kind of process we have to go through, the universalization of the first form. What a loophole by making it specific does is just gets around that. It doesn't universalize it. He says you're missing the whole point. And that's why the loophole problem doesn't work. It's kind of a way to, even though we say we're universalizing it, we're doing everything to not universalize it. And Kant, like I said, missing the point. Okay? Now that's one, but there's also some other problems I want to bring up. And this is why I think the second formulation is a really good idea why Kant has it. Because there are some things we put in the first formulation that doesn't really seem that it would be wrong or right. It seems a little more relative to the situation. And of course, as we see, Kant wants a black and white ethics. He doesn't want that. So what is that? So let's say, for example, today when I get off work, I say I want to take 2 shots of tequila. Okay? Maybe it's had been a long day. And so what I said is create a maxim. When I get off work, I must take 2 shots of tequila. Now let's universalize that. When everyone gets off work, they must take 2 shots of tequila. And does that lead to a contradiction in thought? Well, I don't know. We have to look at it. And a lot of times what Kant means by contradiction in thought is not necessarily a contradiction, but social chaos. It works really well with promises, not so much in the other ones, though. And if I think about this taking tequila, I mean, if everyone did it, maybe it would be bad. Okay, we don't want our police officers to have to go to work later on, or someone has to take care of their children. Maybe pick them up from school after work, taking 2 shots. That would be wrong. But me, who maybe I'm just going to sit at home the rest of the night and maybe do some philosophy and need to relax, take 2 shots. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It seems some things on the edge of this. Is it really wrong or not? That doesn't seem to help us. And what should we do about those situations? Now, the kilos one's very easy, but many other ones happen too. And Kant says that there is a second form of this categorical imperative, which is the exact same thing as this one, just in a different way. But if we look at it, the second form seems to highlight a few extra points Kant wants to make. And when we really go to look at it with some of the problems of it, I think the second form says something a little different. And also at the same time, I think it may be the better version. But he says both these mean the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about his second form, another way in which we can enlist the categorical imperative. The second form says this, that we always treat humanity as an end in itself and never simply as a means. You've probably heard this at least another version of this when someone says never treat anyone as a means to an end. And what does that mean? And most people say it means don't use anybody. Okay? Use anybody, which I think is a pretty good interpretation. Okay? For example, let me show you what it would mean to use somebody or treat someone as a means to an end. So let's say in your class you sit next to, you decide to sit next to someone who's really smart, and over the semester you become their friend. But the reason you're becoming a friend is actually because they take good notes and you want their notes. And you make the person believe that you're going to be your friend, you're going to hang out, but really you're just getting notes so you can pass the class. And then after that you have no kind of use for them. In that case, you would be treating them as a means to an end. You were just using them in order to get what you want out of it, and you're not thinking of that person as in themselves. Okay? Now, another way to treat someone as an end and not a means in that same situation would be to literally be their friend. You're telling them they want it, that person desires your friendship, and therefore you become their friend because you want their friendship. You do it for the sake of the friendship for both of you. You don't necessarily look at to get something out of it. Now, you might get good notes out of it, but that was not your intentions. You did it with goodwill because you were not trying to treat them as a means to an end. You were doing something they wanted as well. Okay, and so it makes sense. And he says this idea is the same as the first formulation, at least according to Kant. Okay, now what we're really seeing here is, I think, stressed even more than the first form, is what Kant wants to express is what he calls autonomy. What he really believes is that all rational people have autonomy, which means the ability, because they can reason, to govern themselves. We have the ability to reason about what I should do, what I can do, and therefore I don't need something like a monarchy or a government necessarily telling me exactly what I need to do. My own reason, my thinking alone can do that. And what he hopes to do in his moral system is to preserve every rational being's autonomy, their free ability to make a rational choice on their own. As you see, that's what we do here. When we're using somebody, maybe lying to them or tricking them or trying to get something out of them by telling them something else, we are taking away their autonomy. We are not giving them a chance to freely reason about what they want in their life. For example, over here, if I was using a person pretending to be their friend to get their homework or to get their notes, all right, what I'd be doing is lying to them, and therefore that person cannot make a free rational decision whether he wants to be my friend or she wants to be my friend or not, because I'm not telling the truth. And therefore, they reason incorrectly. What we want to make sure we do is preserve every human being's autonomy, their free ability to make a rational choice about their life. And this is why I think, even though Kant does find murdering very wrong, and he is highly against murder, and a lot of times in his writings, he's more expressly against lying. Okay? He really does not lie, because you can see exactly how lying takes away one's autonomy. For example, let's say I was a consequentialist, and I decided to, let's say I'm also, on business or something in Japan, okay, having to give a lecture over there. And while I'm over there after the lecture, we go out with some friends who I just met and will never really meet again. And we drink a little too much, and let's say I end up going home and sleeping with somebody while my wife is at home. Okay? Now, I never met this person, barely even know their name. And I come back, and I think to myself consequentially, well, if I tell my wife, I do remember what she said to me if I ever did cheat on her, and what she would do to me. And it sounded really horrible. And so I might not want to do that. And really, if I tell her, I'm going to crush her life, it'll crush my life. If I don't tell her, I'll eventually get over it. She'll never know. We'll go on, live happily ever after. Doesn't it mean, she won't go through that stress and have her whole family ripped apart? Isn't it better that I just don't tell her? Okay? Now, I don't have a wife, but I can imagine being in that situation, and that would be a tough one. But Kant, and many of you probably think Kant has it right here, the consequentialist is wrong. Kant would say, no. What you're doing by lying to her is you are taking away her autonomy. By treating her as a means to your own end to help you get around, you are not giving her her own ability to make a free, rational decision about her own life. She should be able to have all the information so she can decide rationally on her own, does she want to stay with me or not? Will she want to stay with a cheater or not be with a cheater? Hey, she might decide to, but if I take away her ability to have autonomy, then that is what's wrong. And that's what I think explicitly is what Kant is trying to get at, is that what we should do when it comes to ethics is we must preserve the autonomy, okay, of each individual rational being. And I think that's the key point. And I bet many of you can kind of see how that works, okay? And what he hopes to in the end, though Kant even expresses this is an ideal, okay? He hopes eventually in our society we'll get to what he calls a kingdom of ends. Now, he believes it's ideal. He doesn't think we'll get to a point where all human beings are acting autonomously and being kind to each other and living to the categorical imperative. But he does believe, hopefully we can maybe get to a time in society where at least we know all the rules that reason has kind of dictated us. We've been reasoning for so long, we develop the kind of certain code of morals that we have and that we can follow. There will still be criminals, but at least it will be black and white now. We'll know who's wrong and we'll know who's right. And what we basically call this is like the holy grail of ethics. What Kant has thought he has done here, at least, is give us a universal system of ethics that applies to all rational beings, independent of culture, time, all those things, and it's black and white. Okay? It's either right or wrong, that's it. There's no in between. Okay? And this is what Kant hopes he has done. Now, in our next lecture, we're going to look at what I just kind of mentioned, an advantage right there, and a few others that the system gives us, and then we'll look at a few disadvantages, or I'll say counter-arguments, that go against Kant, and we'll let you make up your own mind on whether this is a good ethical system. Okay? That's for now. Let's finish this lecture. I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.